In this video, we're going to do the Section 1.2 activity, cost analysis problem. So the problem says, a plant can manufacture 50 tennis rackets per day for a total daily cost of $3,855 and 60 tennis rackets per day for a total daily cost of $4,245. The first question asks how much does it cost to produce one tennis racket? So you might think that you could just take this cost, $3,855, and divide by 50. The problem is that if you take $4,245 and divide by 60, you get a different cost to produce one tennis racket. And the reason that happens is because we don't just have variable costs in this total cost. So we can't just multiply the number of rackets times the cost per racket and get the total cost. We also have fixed costs in there, so we need to take those into account. So how can we find the cost to produce one tennis racket? Well, what we can do is we can use the information that we are given to find the cost to produce 10 rackets. I know that the difference between these two amounts is going to be the cost to produce 10 rackets because 50 rackets has cost $3,855, 60 rackets has cost $4,245, and so the difference there is 10 rackets. So if I subtract $4,245 minus $3,855, I get $390. And that's $390 for 10 rackets. And so what that means is that if I divide 390 by 10, then I find that the cost for one racket is $39. So $39 per racket. The next question is asking me for the company's fixed daily cost for producing tennis rackets. So I know that the total cost is $3,855 for 50 rackets. So what I can do is I can say, okay, that includes my variable costs and my fixed costs. So my variable costs are $39 per racket times 50 rackets. So 39 times 50 plus the fixed costs, or I could use a variable X, gives me the total cost of $3,855. So I can subtract 39 times 50, or I can do that on my calculator first. And that'll give me my fixed costs. So my fixed costs are $3,855 minus 39 times 50. And if I do that, I get $1,905. So now what I want to do is write an equation, a linear equation, because we're assuming that we have a linear relationship here for the total daily cost of X tennis rackets. So I'm going to use C here for costs. So my cost is equal to the fixed cost, $1,905, plus my $39 per racket times the number of rackets, which is X. And so when you're looking at this equation, we are going to identify the slope and the Y-intercept here. Slope is change in Y per change in X, so that's the $39. And the Y-intercept is the, in this case, the cost when your X or your number of products is 0. So that's going to be $19.05. So you might remember learning about a y equals mx plus b form for a line. M is the slope. and B is the Y-intercept. So same idea here. Lastly, what we're going to do is graph on Desmos the total daily cost for x between 0 and 100. So I'm going to bring up my Desmos here. We're going to, I already have it on the desmos.com. We're going to go to Math Tools again, and this time we're going to click on the graphing calculator. So when I do that, the calculator comes up. We see the graph here on the right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side we have these boxes where we can input things, tables, equations, all kinds of things we're going to input throughout the semester. This time it's an equation. So my equation here, I'm going to use y instead of c, but same idea, 1905 plus 39x. So once I do it, I don't see anything on the graph, but that's because my scale is not correct for seeing this line. I see that my y-intercept is 1,905, so I need to move quite a ways up in order to see the line. So there's a couple ways you could do this. One thing that you can do is if you push the Shift key on your keyboard, obviously you can't see that I'm doing it, but I am pushing down and holding the Shift key, S-H-I-F-T, and what that does is that makes the X or Y axis turn blue, and it gives you a double arrow. And so now, if I scroll, I can move to change the scale of my axis. And so I'm going to move far enough so that I can actually see the red line. And I can also change the x-axis that way as well if I want to. And then if I don't hold the Shift key and just click on the graph, I can just move the graph without changing the scale. So here's my graph. The question is asking me to graph the total daily cost for x between 0 and 100. And so I could kind of adjust the axes until I get that if I wanted to. Easier way to do it if you're looking for specific numbers is clicking on this graph settings button. You can also use the zoom in and out buttons as well. That obviously will zoom the graph in and out too. But if I want specific values on my x and y axis, this is how I do it. So I click on this graph settings button. And there's different settings that you can change here, but I'm trying to change the x-axis. I want to go from 0, so I put 0 on the left side. This is telling you x in between these two numbers, and I want to go up to 100. So I can do that, and then click that button again to close it, and here's my graph. So what I can do in order to put this graph into my notes, there's a couple things you can do. If you click on this button here, it's a box with an arrow in the upper right, and it says Share Graph. That brings up a couple options. One option that you can do is you can export the image, and that will let it download to your computer, and then you can insert in your Word document. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Another thing that you can do if you don't want to do that is you can just put the link in your Word document, which makes a link that when you click on it, then it will open up the graph. So to do that, I click on the copy. That copies it to my keyboard, and then I can go to my Word document and paste it in, just like this. Now, what you can't do is you can't just copy the link from up here because it just says calculator and it's not going to be that specific graph. So if you're going to copy the link, you have to do it from this menu. I'm also going to do the export image. So I'm going to click on that. And what it does is it gives me a couple options here. I can get different sizes for the graph. I can do different line thicknesses. I'm just going to leave that stuff as it is and then hit download PNG. That's going to download it to my computer. Then I go back to my Word document, and where I want to paste the graph, I get that set up, and then I go to Insert, Pictures, Picture from File, and I need to find it in my Downloads folder, and then move this over so you can see it. Go ahead and insert that picture. And there it is. Usually it makes it kind of big, so I might want to shrink that down a little bit so that it fits more nicely on the page. You can also crop it or anything too if you want to do that. But that's how you put a graph image from Desmos into your notes.